Good afternoon. Welcome to our annual VBA holiday webinar entitled Legal Peace, Finding Balance and Calm This Holiday Season. I'm Hetal Challa, Wellness Coordinator at the Supreme Court of Virginia. I'm also a member of the VBA Leadership Development Council, and I am really fortunate to be working with this dynamic group of panelists today. For time purposes, I'm going to let them briefly introduce themselves, but I want to refer you to their detailed bio to get a full description of their professional accolades and background. So, without further ado, Leanne, can we start with you?
Thanks, Hetal. Hi, I'm Leanne Cusumano, Roque, and I am a leadership coach and a former practicing attorney based in Reston, Virginia. I help attorneys transition from being individual contributors to being leaders of self, teams, and organizations. And that's really what today's topic is all about, is how do you find balance and calm for yourself, your teams, and your organizations?
Charlene.
Thank you, Hethel. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Charlene Reilly, and I am the Assistant Director and Education Outreach Manager with Virginia Judges and Lawyers Assistance Program, formerly Lawyers Helping Lawyers. Supporting the well-being of our legal community and profession is really at the heart of our work at VJ Lab, and I'm really honored today to share this space with all of you and these amazing presenters. So thank you for joining us today. Dr. Faith, Dr. James.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. James. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. I'm a psychologist and a wellness counselor, and I spend my time supporting medical students at the American University of the Caribbean as they transition in their clinical sciences into their residency placements and managing a private practice, therapy practice in Northern Virginia. And I am very excited to be here with you today.
Thank you. And last but not least, Tom.
Oh, I would probably disagree about who's least because that's certainly Tom Repczynski. I'm a almost 30-year practicing attorney based in Tysons Corner, Virginia, and I have none of the specialties or specialized skill sets that these fellow panelists have. I have the distinction of having lived and walk the walk. And I am here to sort of say there is life after discovering, mental health challenges. So welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Tom. We're really honored to have you with us today. So let's talk about this topic and what we're going to be covering today. Often when we think about the holidays, we think of it as a time to recharge, perhaps a time to wind down. It's obviously a very festive and joyous time. But what we've realized over the years is that for legal professionals in particular, and notice I say legal professionals and not just attorneys, it can actually be a more stressful time. And we're going to unpack in a little bit more detail, what type of stressors, we're referring to. But today, our learning objectives really are to talk about stress, both professionally as well as some stressors that could happen in your personal life as you're balancing expectation and boundaries around the holidays. In addition, we're incorporating a kind of timely topic of digital noise. We are living in a world where we just can't escape technology, our cell phones, and a lot of the noise around us. So we're going to kind of talk about strategies and tools that all of us can kind of be mindful of through the holidays, but also tools and strategies that you can take into 2026 to hopefully help you flourish in your personal life as well as your professional life. So first, I want to kind of delve a little bit into occupational stressors of attorneys and what is it about the holidays? Charlene, if you can help us kind of get this conversation going, what is it about the holidays in particular for attorneys and legal professionals that makes it more stressful than maybe some other professions?
Thank you, Hethel. So as we all know, being a lawyer really carries, year-round occupational risks and challenges, right? There's this mental and emotional strains, demands of the practice, physical toll, and so many other pressures. We're working really long hours, sometimes unusual hours. Um, there's a lot of high stake problems. We're absorbing other individuals' crises. Sometimes we feel responsible for outcomes that we can't always control. And yet we're oftentimes expected to project confidence, um, maintain composure, always push through. And as we know, these pressures, the occupational challenges and risks, they don't just pause because it's November or December. We don't hit the pause button because it's Thanksgiving or other holidays. And then for many of us, this time of year kind of intensifies things, right? So on top of the normal workload, we also have now year-end deadlines. We have billing and collection pressures. Some of our clients could be even more anxious than usual. Some of our colleagues could be more anxious than usual. Courts are closing, yet we're still trying to work and cram everything in. Some of our colleagues might be on holidays. We're working with fewer resources. Some of us are also now juggling family expectations, financial issues, travel, caregiver responsibilities. The list never seems to end, right? The season tends to bring more challenges too, loneliness, isolation, things we're going to talk about today, in some instances, grief and depression, added vulnerabilities for those seeking recovery too. Again, stress doesn't really take a holiday, and the seasonal pressures just stack on top of our already demanding profession, and some of those occupational risks I already mentioned. So as a panel, when we started preparing for this, we all kind of talked openly with each other about some of the stressors and pressures that we deal with, and they're different for all of us. So we are hoping now that you all, in attending this, would share with us what some of the pressures and stresses you all are feeling, whether it's financial concerns, office expectations, travel, caregiving, whatever it is. We're hoping you all would share with us now so that we can kind of tailor the conversation in the direction that it needs to go. We're going to share a QR code with all of you now. And again, we're hoping that you'll share some of the stresses and challenges you're sharing. The QR code, for those that do share with us, it is completely confidential. It's anonymous. So thank you for sharing with us.
Think of this as an opportunity to let some of it go simply by writing it down
Yes.
and putting it out there in the universe. Sometimes that alone I find helps.
Yes, the naming it. Exactly.
Yeah. I think it also helps us recognize we're not alone in any of this, too.
Just laughing at the comment in the, yeah, attorney for the federal government, enough said. Yeah. So many changes in the last year.
Well, as Charlene mentioned, depending upon what area of the law you practice, whether you're a clerk, whether you're a paralegal, we all have different stressors around this time occupationally. So that's a very good point about the person in the federal government has definitely unique challenges going on right now.
I think too, like Charlene and I were talking about this a few weeks ago, right around Thanksgiving, right? And I was saying, wow, suddenly it's like everybody wants everything now. There's something just about the end of
Mm.
the calendar year too, where people start, I don't know, it's the herd mentality or something. Let's do this before the end of the year.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
Well, there's that, and sometimes there's legitimate reasons for that too, right? I mean, there may be tax consequences, there may be uh, that, and it might just be you're getting an early jump on your New Year's resolution. So I think there are certain practice areas in particular, and unfortunately, practice areas that are particularly stressful for the attorneys involved. So
Yeah.
things tend to ratchet up in those practice areas for that reason at this time of year.
Yeah.
Right. And then when you
So,
take those occupational stressors and mix it with the family expectations, the gift giving, the trips, someone wrote in the chat, pressure to take travel with family, takes time away from your practice. All of those can kind of be overwhelming.
I wish I could say I laughed about it in the moment, but I can tell you I had at least three examples in the last several hours today that all would have been perfect as preparation for this, including my wife saying, what do you mean this can't be the top priority? I was like, oh, well, it is, along with 20 other top priorities.
So a lot of the registrants are just putting their comments in the chat. So I'm going to just read out some of them. Let's see. End of year rush,
yeah.
um, government work, had my personal appraisal plan changed, as well as an additional 5% more work now. That's mandatory. Kids being off from school, um, immigration law issues. That's definitely very, very timely. Um, Disruptions due to inclement weather, absolutely. I know that the court was closed for several days this week and last week. Personal injury work, end of the year settlement season. So as we, can see, everybody has their own kind of unique individual issues going on with their jobs, but nonetheless, they're still, all significant. Holiday gift giving, office expectations.
Yeah.
I think it's important to mention too, the opposite of all of this, it can be equally as stressful. For some people who have lost loved
Yeah.
ones or whose relationships have ended, or maybe they've lost their job, right? It's the
Yeah.
absence of that in this time of year being a particularly difficult time to deal with loss. So we are certainly
Yeah.
not suggesting or minimizing that either.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And someone wrote that in the chat as well. Yeah, and financial constraints, if you have a lot of gifts you feel obligated to buy, whether it's for staff members or family, that added financial pressure can really add to a lot this time of year as well. So,
Yeah.
Charlene, back to you with the Slido.
Mm.
Yeah. Can you all see it? The results are out. There's just so many demands here that you can see. You mentioned a few from the chat, but being at home with children, holidays, Christmas, obligations, family expectations, grief that Tom mentioned, the isolation, caring for parents, not just children, the travel, the plans, all of this again, just on top of the usual occupational strains and challenges that we deal with on a daily basis. It can really be quite overwhelming if we don't find ways to manage it.
Thanks, Charlene. So,
You're
we've
welcome.
talked a lot about stress already. It's 13 minutes into our presentation, and we've made a lot of references to stress. And so I think it's a good time for us to kind of understand what stress is and what it can do to us emotionally and physically. So I think Dr. James, this is a perfect time to transition to you and kind of give us a clinical overview of what do we need to know about stress? How does this come up for attorneys? And what are some strategies?
Well, thank you. And no stress there, right? We're going to just dive right into stress, and I get the joy of stressing us all out. And later on, I get the joy of talking a little bit about calm too. So I'm glad that it brings a smile to our face, because that's one of the very first things that lets us know that stress doesn't have to be, master and commander. If we can find humor in a situation, generally speaking, we're able to thrive in ways we need to. I'm looking at the chat, it's on the right side of my screen, and all of these things that have been placed here, I just honor and echo them, because you are describing regular day events and then life events that contribute to challenges in the mind and the body and the spirit. So, what I want to do is kind of set an intention around something you're going to hear me say repeatedly, and it is you have five senses, and the way we know and thrive and grow is through using our five senses. So, when we think about stress, it impacts all five of our senses, and that can happen every day. And for some of us, it can be in a constant space. So, I'm just going to throw out a couple of things. If you are in conversations and you find yourself maybe getting irritated because a person isn't getting done with what they were going to say fast enough, or you wake up and you've got pain in your body, or you dread doing something that maybe you shouldn't ordinarily dread, but you kind of are. Your appetite might go away. You might find yourself sleeping more or less. Some of those are things that are coming from a place of stress in us. I know this time of conversation is kind of like we're thinking about this time of year, but for some people, especially people in the legal profession, stress is really experienced on a continuum. It is not just a one and done thing. It's experienced on a continuum. And for a lot of people that are in this beautiful industry, there's sometimes a culture and a belief that this is just what I do. This is just how it is. This is the way it goes. And when someone like me comes along and says, okay, maybe you want to take a breath,
Hmm.
I want to do something that helps a little relaxation. I get, Dr. James, I don't have time for that. What? Can you condense it down? Meditation. I don't do that. That doesn't work. I can't do yoga. I'm not flexible. I get all those things. So what I want you to really take away from this time with me is I want you to hear me say set intention around your five senses. The other thing I want to talk to you about really quickly is insulation and inoculation. When we think of managing our stress, we have to insulate ourselves. That means we have to be protective around who gets to talk to us, who gets to spend time with us, how we use our physical body, how we use our mental bandwidth. We're going to talk about that even more. And then I want you to think about inoculation. You think, when you hear inoculation, you think vaccines. Well, what can we inoculate ourselves with on a regular daily basis through the use of all of our five senses that help us function at our peak performance? And that's something you're going to hear us talking about. Everybody's going to mention that at some point, but you're definitely going to hear me talking more about that. You have this great platform of people here that are here to support you. If you're that person that says, I already have people that I talk to, I don't need counseling or coaching or anything like that, or if there's a problem, I'll go talk to someone like that. If that's you, I say, great, I salute you. It's a good idea to have nice little tune ups and to
Hmm.
remember that wellness is your wingman, and we do not abandon our wingman. You're going to hear me say that so much. It is our wingman.
Dr. James, I am so sorry to interrupt you. I just had some comments in the chat just about some people having some issues with the volume. If you could speak up just a little bit.
Okay, most definitely. I hope that's better. Yeah. So the last thing I said that I want everybody to hear is wellness is your wingman, and we do not abandon our wingman. So you'll hear me say that more.
Love the Top Gun reference. As such,
There you go, Tom. You got it.
never leave your wingman. You
And
got to,
sorry, go ahead, Tom.
no, go ahead. Nope.
I was just going to say, I kind of laughed about your meditation thing because I'm also a yoga teacher. And, we think meditation's this complicated thing. But I started meditating when I was back in the day, right? I think it was Borders, right? I was walking through the shelves and I found Lauren Roche's book, Meditation Made Easy. It can be really simple. It doesn't have to be this complicated thing. Nowadays, I do positive intelligence, right? Rub two fingertips together with such attention that you can feel the fingertip ridges. That can be a meditation, anything to interrupt the stress cycle.
Well, it's interesting that you focused on the meditation part because I focused on, for some reason, it triggered for me the inoculation part. And I don't remember if I jumped to mindfulness or if you mentioned Dr. Faith, mindfulness, but I absolutely believed it was a crock There, I don't know what mindfulness is, but it sounds like a crock. And I was seeing someone and they told me, go to this mindful, UCLA has a mindfulness program and they've got this thing. And I listened to it in my car thinking, this is it. This is great. I lasted maybe a minute and a half, and it was the crock that I thought it was because I wasn't ready to understand and hear and appreciate the value that it was. And I just had a different definition in my mind of what mindfulness meant. So it's funny how just even the term itself can be a turnoff or bring more stress.
Yeah,
I'm so glad you said that. If I could just say this part really quickly, lots of times I say that your mindfulness is your journey, and
Mhm.
you have to set your own intention. Somebody's mindfulness might be repairing an engine or painting a picture.
Mm.
So I think that I'm so glad that you brought that out, because some people do come to wellness with this idea that it's got to go a certain way or follow a certain script, and it doesn't.
absolutely. And I want to highlight something that all of you have talked about. When we're talking about mindfulness and we're talking about meditation, a lot of that, the purpose is to quiet the noise, and we've made this reference to digital noise. And sometimes when you take a few minutes to center yourself, it is a great way to, in some ways, process a lot of the noise around us. I had mentioned in the beginning that we were going to be talking about kind of taking a pause in the digital noise and how sometimes that comes up for legal professionals in terms of technology. So why don't we segue a little bit into that topic of how the evolution of technology in the legal profession has changed things for a lot of people to actually increase the stress. Now more than ever, we are so accessible. If you look at, the way things used to be, you always have your cell phone, which has kind of morphed into this professional tool with very little boundaries in place. We're texting for work and with colleagues. Some attorneys tell me that they've got that thing on 24 hours a day. Some attorneys are using it for emailing, for case flow management. It's just become such an integral part of practice, as well as in your personal life, your sole mode of communication. So stress is coming from lots of different areas. We've got upsetting news, we've got political polarization, we've got social media. It's hard to even go on Facebook, Instagram, news. I've started watching nice news for this reason, but it's everywhere. So how can we kind of implement a certain amount of detachment when we know that the lawyer mindset is trained to analyze, to stay informed, to debate? How do we take a step back? So that is going to be a question for you, Dr. James, in a second. But I want to first ask Tom, just his take on how does this come up, for attorneys and how can they stay connected?
Well, the reality is it's every one of those realities for attorneys, just like it is for others. That's the starting point. The difficulty at first is, in my mind, this mindfulness, recognizing it as a problem, recognizing that there is something that can be done. I'll say different thoughts come to mind. It starts at the top, right? This idea that we should always be connected or that we must always be connected, whether you're a young associate, somebody who's been doing this for 10, 20 years. If the expectations from your boss or from the more senior lawyers is that you are going to be connected 24/7 and they don't make any accommodation for it, that's a problem. The reality is it comes down to something more general for dealing with that issue, which is what are realistic expectations for deliverables? What are deadlines? What are real deadlines? What are false deadlines? And are we willing to draw the line between personal and professional? I think the people I work with, I go out of my way to say, look, if I'm giving you a deadline, it's because that's the real deadline. I don't believe in this idea of false deadlines. So if I tell you I need it by 5 o'clock on Friday, it's because in part, I don't want you to have to work the weekend. I don't think you should if you don't have to, right? But I'm going to tell you Monday if I think it can be Monday. But if you tell me you're going to shut it down over the weekend, then what's the difference between my telling you 9 a.m. Monday or 5 p.m. Friday, right? And so there's this idea that a deadline has meaning, and how everyone is going to deal with those deadlines has to be something that people both on the receiving end and the other end deal with. Now, digital noise, um, I think in part you have to be prepared to say there are going to be times when there is a professional emergency, right? For everything I've just said, if I call you on Saturday at 2 o'clock, it's because I'm probably already in the office and I've already spent several hours doing this, and I'm doing everything I can to spread the wealth, as it were. So we have to have an understanding that an emergency is a true emergency. Redefining what is an emergency is a tough thing to do, but it's necessary. And lastly, I'll just say, and happy to hear from any of my colleagues on this, the digital noise, so many different avenues to take that. It has to be what's right for you. I was a government major. When election day comes and CNN has its wall of, all that data, I'm up till 2, 3 in the morning. I'm a junkie, right? I want to watch that. But 24/7, 360, I shut it off. I can't deal with election news anymore. So I put that aside like it's a holiday for me, like it's election day. Get the popcorn. We're going to sit here. We're going to watch that news. It can make a big difference when you decide to shut certain things down. But at the same time, right, the flip side is pick a time. I'm going to give myself 10 minutes. I'm going to set a timer and I'm going to go scroll for a while. I'm not going to, what do they call it? Doomsday
Doom
scrolling,
scrolling.
right? If you don't make those limits for yourself, it's just not going to happen. So, anyone else?
Yeah, I would say it's helpful to actually set the timer. Hey
Yeah.
Siri, put on a 10-minute timer.
Yep.
Because
Got one
otherwise,
running right. Got one running right here.
as it does
Yeah.
it, sorry, now everybody's gonna have a 10-minute timer. But
Yep.
but otherwise, you can get sucked in. So
Yeah.
I think it's related to what you're talking about too. The question that's in the chat about protocols and resources recommended to help supervisory attorneys encourage people to take breaks. Tom, what you're talking about, right, is you have a plan. So
Yeah.
you know what needs to be done when, and you're making that so that you can back out the work that has to be done to get to the result. I
Right.
think that's a huge thing.
Well, my wife taught me literally. It's just the kids. We have 2 kids, and they know the first thing in the text chat's going to be, "All right, what's the plan? And what's the plan?" Right? And it's true about just about anything. If you don't have a plan, right? My dad used to say, "I I don't know where we're going, but we are making great time." Right? And it's the same thing. How do you know if it's going well if you don't have the plan? And we joke about it, but I'm not at my desk right now. I'm actually in a visiting office, but I have an electronic timer in fact, if someone wants one, I have some Offit Kurman versions of this with a 5, 10, 15, and 30-minute option. And over the course of the day, I change what I'm setting it to based on what I have coming up or what else is going on. But if I'm going to start a meeting, I had an associate actually very early on in my managing mode, feedback that I got, not directly from the associate, but actually from later from a manager said, yeah, the feedback was you would tell them it was going to be a 10-minute meeting, and an hour later you will have covered 20 topics, right? And they had things to do, but they didn't feel like they could say anything. One of the most meaningful pieces of feedback I ever got. And I went out and got not a 10-minute timer, but I found an hourglass that the sand falls through. That's a 6-minute timer because we know that's 1/10 of an hour.
So, question for all of you. One question that we receive a lot is setting expectations, boundaries around clients. We've talked a little bit about boundaries with work and colleagues, but what about clients? What have you guys done in the past to set realistic expectations with clients in the front?
Is this an open question?
This is an open question, and I'll give an example.
Mm,
For example, are there any boundaries that could be set with time? Like I once,
yeah,
had spoken with an attorney. He was very kind of, diligent and consistent with having a rule that when I get home for the first hour, I turn off my cell phone
yeah.
to spend with my family. That is my family time, at least for the first hour. Do all of you have some kind of suggestions that you could offer related to boundary setting with clients?
I want to take a piece of that if I could. I think that for attorneys, when people come in to see you, sometimes they treat you like you're everything. You're their doctor, you're their priest, you're their religious person. They want to tell you everything and they want you to listen to their everything. And so part of setting those expectations is, I think, inside ourselves, right? Time is one because um, we do know how much time we're going to allot, but then we also have to be mindful of our own selves that what kind of conversation is this? Is it over the phone? Is it in person? What's my agenda in this? How do I kind of separate myself out from all these other spaces that this person wants me to hold for them? And I think that's a good thing to just remember, just that level setting of yourself. Take 2 seconds before you even meet with anybody just to say, here's what's on my mental agenda. In the military, there's a phrase that is, and if anybody hears military, you correct me. Tell them what you're
Mm,
gonna tell them, and then tell them again. So when you do that talk with whomever, you want to think to yourself, I need to tell you something. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you and tell you again. And you do it quickly so that you can exit.
mm. So getting better at communicating would certainly shorten a lot of the time, but in terms of the boundary aspect of it, I, I have found, and this does not work for everybody, but it's who I am and it's what defines me. I just tell them. I say, I'm at my kids, whatever, or my wife's got dinner on the table. Like this conversation has to end, right? And part of it too, and I'm hoping that there's other comments that are, well, before you even get to that, right? What boundaries could you put out there? But it has gotten a lot easier to just tell whoever it is, because the answer is, look, and if that's not good enough for you, I'll be happy to give you some names of some other attorneys, right? Because that's going to be our relationship, or we're not going to have a relationship.
Yeah, I think what you just said is key that, and it's part of doing the initial screening with clients
Yeah.
is who wants to be in partnership
Yeah.
rather than have a subservient relationship, right? And so I think the contracting
Yep.
piece up front
Yeah.
is critical. So, you can do it in the initial consultation. Hey, these are the norms for our office. And then write it in the contract, say it out loud, both for how they treat you as a lawyer, but also for how they treat your staff.
So I'm
I
Yeah.
hearing
for
some
that.
really great ideas here. Put it in the initial screening, the initial consultation, say it out loud, maybe repeat it a couple times, put it in writing, make the expectations very clear. I have also heard attorneys who charge more for correspondences outside of business hours for
Yep.
emergencies, or put that in writing also. That's a very popular thing. But I think doing it early on, I think really sets the tone rather than having a very kind of open communication. I'm here for you 24 hours a day. And then I think it's kind of natural human nature to want to expand, that boundary a little bit. So,
Well, that's true. But to Dr. James's point, right? The tell them what you told them part, right? That last part. Um, I would say it is the most effective. Not only do I tell them, but so often the client says, fine, I understand. You need me to get that draft back to you so you can finalize it, or you need something from me so the next step can happen. And so what I started doing, I said, look, I've planned this, right? How much time do you need? If you tell me you need 2 days, tell me you need 2 days. Hold me accountable when I say otherwise, right? But 3 days from now, I'm going on vacation. So I planned this in a way. And so if you can't get it back to me in two, it's going to be another week before I'm ever going to look at this. And I have found that just saying it more often, hey, just a reminder, I'm going on vacation next week, rather than saying, hey, I set the boundaries. And if you got a out of office, too bad. I tell them and I tell them again, right? And then they get the out of office. And then it's, oh, yeah, I guess I really didn't have any excuse.
And Tom, I like the way you said that. Just a reminder, right?
Mhm.
That is again setting an intention around a boundary that's in place. And that's not only good for the client, but it's good for the legal provider because sometimes when we are under like continued high pressure, we forget ourselves those things we put in place. And so
Yeah.
if we change up just a little bit, right? If you meet with me in the off time or if you take my call in the off time, I'm going to keep on calling you because and it's just sometimes a one off, but anytime we repeat or we go against what we tried to set up, sometimes that is also what gets us into those little pickles.
And I think part of it is, right, being a lawyer and having worked with many lawyers over the years, right, our personality type is to be very
Mm.
type A. Get it done now, right? Be of service often too, right? So remembering that taking care of ourselves is equally important is something I know I've had to learn. And I'm guessing a lot of us could use booster shots with that.
Well, and Leanne, I think that you've transitioned to the next topic very well, and that's strategies. The bulk of our presentation today is, helping our audience kind of think of ways that they can find some sense of calm, connection, and control. And so let's start with, Dr. James, as from a control standpoint, from a kind of setting some parameters for stress reduction. Can you just offer, some additional ideas? I know you've kind of, given us some great things to think about already, but what would be some of the, top things that you think are the most effective?
Sure. So I want to highlight again setting our intention. Like with that, when anything you have to do, just try your best to remember what is my purpose? Why am I here to do whatever? If it's going to a soccer game, what am I here for? I'm here to cheer. I'm here to be the best parent I can be. The other piece that's really important in this is remember the things that you can't change. Like there are really some things that are going on around you that they are outside of your control. So feeling like or thinking that you have to manage it all, control it all, do it all, that kind of feeds a little bit of the type A, but also it feeds that part of us that sometimes thinks it won't work out if we don't do it. So if I'm out there thinking this won't work unless I do it, I got my hand on it. Well, you might need to learn to delegate. And I say that because sometimes when we delegate, we still have to run behind if you want to make sure it flows a certain way. I said earlier that wellness is your wingman. A lot of this is trying to get in the habit of doing things that work well. Sometimes we hear the word wellness and we go, that's just, what does that even mean? It's too hard. A really good strategy is again, focus on your five senses, just starting with today. If you just took today and said, I've got five senses, what can I do to bring in wellness using them? I'm looking at my hand,
Mm.
right? I'm looking at my hand. This is my sense of touch. When I listen to you guys, when I see you smile, that's my sight at work. I got a little piece of joy because the handout, when it came to me, it's an outline, guys, and it seems like it's mostly on the right side of the paper. Well, I'm left-handed. Do you know how amazing it is to have the whole left side blank for me to take notes? I'm so jazzed. You guys can't even imagine how happy you whoever made this thing, and here it is. You made me so happy today just with that. So you want to think about, how can I deploy that action? That is an action cognition. That is a thinking space. When you get in the habit of using your brain every single day to say, how can I use my five senses to bring in something good for me that doesn't cost any money, but it's all in the resources that I can use. That is the number one strategy for having good wellness. All of information comes into your body through your five senses, and then your central nervous system tells us what to do with it. So if I start with intention, I use my five senses, I'm going to practice some good strategies, and I'm not going to forget, because the moment I talk to you about your five senses, you all know what they are, right? So you're going to use them. If you remember nothing else from this conversation, remember you have five senses that you need to be using every day to practice good wellness strategies.
And the other thing, Dr. James, I want to highlight that I also think is something that is easy for all of us to do is prioritizing conscious breath. And I know that you have mentioned that in the past. Can you share some of that information with us?
Sure, and I'll be quick. So let me tell you guys, I don't breathe well. So for people that say you should do box breathing and count backwards from five, I'm gasping by the time I get to three. If you're that person and you can do that well, I applaud you. I salute you. That's why I say you have to make it work for you. A good breath is a deep breath in through your nose and then push that air out. That's a really good level setting breath. Now, my hope is that if you can incorporate counting backwards or doing a four square, which is box breathing, I salute you. I want you to do that. There is an app, and it is called the Breathe app. It is phenomenal. When people tell me that they don't have time for wellness, I say, well, are you going to go to sleep at some point? And they say, yes, Dr. James. I said, aha, because I got you now. Because there's meditations you can do on your way to bed at night. And they have great talk topics for lawyers. So it's a great exercise.
Great. Thank you so much. Leanne, I know that you have a formula, which I want to remind everyone to please look at the materials because there's a lot of really great strategies that we've included in there. But can you walk us through some of the tools that you have found to be helpful for lawyers?
Sure. You're talking about in the resources, there's a handout on 10
Yeah.
immediate ways to manage stress. The
Yeah.
thing I would say is that all of us are different. So there's not one way to do this. Just experiment until you find what works for you. And then it may work for a while, and you may find it doesn't work now. So experiment again and find what works for you. The thing I will say is, listening to Dr. Faith talk about breathing, is that at least for the kind of yoga that I teach, is we don't even talk about the breath until you get some physical activity. Because until the body is calm, there's no way to focus on the breath. It can be anxiety provoking, actually, to tell somebody to breathe if their body is just full of tension. So I would say that the the thing is, get some kind of activity. And people sometimes think, oh, I'm not a runner, or I'm not really physically active. Just go walk around the building for 10 minutes or walk around outside for 10 minutes. We're not talking about anything major, but that again interrupts the stress response. It changes the chemistry of the body, which then changes our thoughts, and it allows the body and then the mind to settle. So health is wealth. We think, oh, may have to do this or whatever, but if we're not healthy, everything else falls by the wayside. So just taking a few minutes, you can chunk it. They're saying now that 15 minutes of consistent activity is enough. I mean, so if you do 4 15 minutes or 2 15 minutes, or maybe just one to start, it's great. You can walk and talk and do meetings. You can bring somebody with you, whatever it is, just some kind of physical activity. That's the number one thing that I would say.
Okay, great. I also want to highlight the role of therapy and kind of knowing when to ask for help, decreasing stigma around help seeking. Do any of the panelists, Charlene, this might be a good question for you since you work for VJ Lab and VJ Lab is such an important support for attorneys. Can you kind of help us understand some of those resources?
Yeah, thanks, Hetal. So, Virginia Judges and Lawyers Assistance Program, again, VJ Lab, formerly Lawyers Helping Lawyers. We're a free, confidential, voluntary, completely non-disciplinary support, not just for lawyers, but all legal professionals, magistrates, clerks, law school students, judges, and immediate family members. So I just want to repeat that again. It's free, it's confidential, it's non-disciplinary. We have wonderful relationships with State Bar, VBA, and many other organizations, but we're a separate nonprofit. I just want to be clear about that. And these days, we offer a full spectrum of assistance. So it could be peer support. We also provide assessments, clinical assessments. We can do so much, offer referrals, ongoing check-ins. We also offer wellness groups, women's groups, different support groups, long-term monitoring. So many opportunities out there. And this would be in addition to EAP plans, insurance. So it's just another form of support and assistance. And in addition to that, we also do a lot of education and outreach. So things like this, I saw in the webinar chat today, a few people commented that they'd like to see more programs like this. Again, everything VJ Lab does is complimentary. So we're always happy to visit law firms, bar associations, and other organizations. We can speak on a number of issues. We can speak on these kinds of issues, stress, but we can also talk about imposter syndrome. We can help organizations and firms design well-being plans. Everything we talked about here today, we're happy to do that with your firm or organization. And I think the thing I just want everybody to remember is we're just another form of support out there. And we're talking about the stress during holidays today. We're 24/7 too. We're not 5 days a week, 8 to 5. If you need us at midnight or 3 a.m., we are there for you. And on our last slide, I don't think it's included in the materials we had pushed out, but before we end today, I'll have a screen with VJ Labs contact information on there for you, including the 24/7 line for everybody.
Thanks a lot,
Thanks,
Charlene.
Hetal. Yeah.
So,
Char if I could, Charlene, I want
Yeah.
to one thank you for not just what VJ Lap does, but where it came from.
Yeah.
Had enough of a stigma attached to it that as someone who's been practicing almost 30 years, it was lawyers helping lawyers.
Yeah.
And it was this ethical requirement, but taboo in every sense of the word,
Mhm.
because the only people who needed lawyers helping lawyers were those who had found themselves having difficulty with drugs, having difficulty with alcohol. And those are major life events, life-changing situations. There's no question. But what I've learned as part of my own wellness or well-being journey, which has really come, I would say full circle, but it really sort of kicked up into an extra gear in the last year or two, was recognizing that a resource like a VJ lap, which when I was recently introduced to it, I didn't even recognize the acronym and had to be told, I think by you probably. So I think there is this need for especially more senior attorneys to recognize that one, it's not taboo, two, you are not alone, and that three, it's okay to talk about it amongst not just your partners, but with more junior lawyers and candidly with other attorneys, other firms. I had an internal discussion, confidential, but sharing enough of what I can. I wanted to publish something, and I asked for some effectively peer review before I published it about things that I had been dealing with and the sort of mental struggles that came with it, the difficulty of meeting or missing client deadlines, et cetera. And the feedback in the form of a question was, well, one, I wouldn't do it, right? So you give you some idea of where they likely were on the age spectrum. But two, why would you want to, right? Like, why would you want to put this out there, right? So think about what is this as a business development or whatever. And for me, the answer was because it's who I am. There is this realism, this sort of I wear it all on my sleeve that has really worked for me as a litigator. Opposing counsel in a new case who have had me in a prior case will tell me all the time, look, I've told my client that we can trust this guy, or, right, I've had a case with him before, and the relationship I have with him is this sense of adversaries, yes, but colleagues, professionals. And so, just like, hey, I missed that call, I meant to get back to you, I forgot, as opposed to my assistant didn't give me the message, sorry, or I missed an email, right? It's this truthfulness that I've always said to clients, look, I don't know it all, but I know what I don't know. I'll tell you I don't know it and I'll go find out. And it's the same approach to this openness that I think we as a profession, at least for me, I have found that owning when things were so heavy on me that that's the real reason why I didn't return opposing counsel's phone call. That's the reason why, even though I promised him a response by Friday, he was calling me the following Friday saying, hey, my client's upset that your client's dragging their feet. Um, and I ended up breaking down and confiding in opposing counsel. It was eye opening, but it was this just it all hit me all at once, and I found myself in tears with opposing counsel. But it was someone who I knew and I trusted, uh, and to his credit, I have thanked him personally. I won't name him here. It'd be more embarrassing for him, I think, than me. But not only did he do right by me in that case, I know he spoke with his client and said, look, this isn't your adversary, right? The attorney on the other side needs more time. And in addition to that, he's the only one. He called me up about a week later, a couple weeks later, and said, "How you doing?" And that
Yeah,
is something that we as a profession have to be doing more of, right? Being open about it
I agree.
ourselves, and then being responsive when you recognize or think you recognize in someone that may be symptomatic of too much, and too much can be a whole lot more than just too many files on their plate or too many deadlines, because none of us knows what the person on the other end of that phone call brought to that conversation that day or that meeting that day. And unless you're willing to be open about it and understand that we've all got our burdens, thinking that they're out to screw you or get your client or whatever else may just not be the case. They may just need your help.
Yeah.
And Tom, thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
And, I think that opens up a deeper conversation about, how
Yeah.
to support our colleagues? How can supervisors support their
Yeah.
associates? What role do they have? So let's kind of touch on how do we change the culture? How do we support each other? I want to also kind of address some of the questions in the chat because I think that they're kind of relevant to this topic also. One of the questions was, are there any resources or protocols recommended to help a supervising attorney to encourage staff and subordinates to take breaks, but doing so in a way that does not negatively impact the team? Can you guys think of a structure like that? I can go ahead and just say that Charlene and I have gone to a lot of firms where they actually have wellness break rooms. We were so happy to see that, where staff members could go in there and do a little quick meditation session. They had exercise dumbbells, a TV. They had many kind of things to just kind of prioritize restoration. Can you guys think of some other things?
And Tom already mentioned this, having supervisors and leaders leading by example. I think that is one of the best things that we can be doing. And again, not just leaders, but everybody, partners, other attorneys, leading by example, taking breaks, having boundaries, going on vacation, taking vacations, turning off when they can. I think that's one of the best things that we can be doing in this profession.
Yeah, and
Can
that
we
that
have, since we have about 4 more minutes left, I would love to kind of give you guys all an opportunity to make some closing remarks to that point of changing the culture and supporting colleagues.
Yeah, I love what Charlene says about setting the example. I would say the other thing that I think um, would be very helpful in changing culture, which I don't, is that if a firm not just contracts with clients, but does some kind of internal team charter or these are our values and here and everybody has permission to say when we're not following our values. So doing something internally to say this is who we want to be, this is how we want to be with each other, and let's all agree to hold each other to this.
Yeah. Leanne.
Well,
Yeah, the social contract, right? But the social contract within the firm itself, within the building of the relationships. And look, you have to be willing to be called out on it too, and they have to know you're willing to be called out on it. So that's one thing I have found that I've gotten much better about, not just when it comes to this, but to say, look, I'm not often wrong, but when I am, you need to call me out on it. You need to tell me I'm wrong, and whatever it happens to be, and just let them know I am giving you permission, right, to say these things, right, and it's a safe space, and it has had a lot to do, I think, with my relationship building, both internally and externally. So that would probably be the biggest thing I would recommend to my colleagues, especially when I say colleagues, my aging colleagues, those of us who are finding ourselves strangely no longer in the young lawyers section, to recognize that it is no longer a badge of honor as a young lawyer to be the highest billable associate as a rule. And there may be places where there's exceptions to prove the rule, but in general, I've seen and heard enough from the younger lawyers to know that, hey, this is a great place to be because I have more family time. I have more work-life balance, and that's a good thing.
Thank you, Tom. Dr. James, any closing remarks?
I was just going to say, everything that I echo everything that's been said
Mhm.
here, placing value on where you spend your time, recognizing that sometimes work will be stressful, but it doesn't have to
Mhm.
be, work doesn't have to rule us if we set our days with intention. Yeah, I wanted to add that.
Okay, great. Well, I know that we could literally talk for another hour, but we are almost out of time. So I just want to make sure that I thank everyone who joined us today. Really appreciate the large turnout that we had. And I want to thank our esteemed panel today for providing all these helpful strategies to all of us. I want to wish everyone a wonderful holiday season, a wonderful 2026. Please stay tuned for wellness programming for next year. We've got the winter meeting where we're going to be organizing a wellness program. We've got the women's retreat coming up in the spring. If we didn't answer your questions, please feel free to email us and we'd be happy to get back to you. So thanks again, everybody.